So schools will be closed from Thursday for an early winter break and also to hopefully help reduce COVID transmission rates. While schools are not known to be hotbeds of viral infection, any contact, particularly with the highly contagious Delta variant, is a concern at this point. But in South Africa, schools, of course, are not only places of learning, but places of feeding as well, with lessons learned from the first hard lockdown when dependent school kids went hungry. Can we get it right this time? I'm joined now by Hopolang Selebalo, co-head of research at the NGO Equal Education. Good evening. Thank you so much for your time. Your organisation had to take government to court to force them to roll out these school dinners because during the extended lockdown, which was way longer than any school holiday, government said, well, it's just like a holiday, and you forced them through court action to start rolling those meals out. So, do you expect the process of providing a meal to needy school kids this time round to be seamless?
Wow, I mean, that's a big question. We will be monitoring the implementation of school meals during the school break. But maybe let me just start off by saying that the minister did confirm the school or the winter break. But the trade-off in this instance was that while schools are closing earlier than we'd anticipated, they were initially supposed to be closed on the 9th of July, next week Friday. They're closing this Wednesday. They will be reopening sooner. So instead of the 26th of July, they'll be opening on the 19th of July. So there are about 3 extra days that learners will be at home. And this is where the minister has committed to learners receiving meals for those 3 extra days. She used a phrase such as MECs already know what to do. And in our experiences, it's been erratic from province to province in terms of the provisioning of food, especially when learners are at home. It becomes an even more exceptional difficult situation when learners are at home.
Yeah, and I mean, here's the thing, is that those school meals are only for school terms. And traditionally, during the holidays, those kids don't get that meal. So as you say, now there's an extra 3 days essentially tacked onto this holiday that's now been pulled earlier. So which 3 days are we talking about?
It seems from the minister's speech, although it was quite difficult to make out, that we're looking at the end of this week and into early next week. So likely next week, Monday, if we are correct in our assessment. It would have been, we're trying to ascertain that information so that we can also share with the public what those dates are, so that parents and learners know that they can access meals during this particular period of time. But it seemed from what the minister said that we're talking about the end of this week into early next week for those 3 days.
All right.
But she needs to be more explicit. It was incredibly difficult to make out which period she was talking about when she spoke earlier today.
And of course, you've only got 2 days left to communicate with the kids when they can come back, because tomorrow's a school day and so is Wednesday. Those kids need to know when they can turn up for a meal and when they shouldn't bother making the trip. Talk to me generally about Equal Education's position on the decision to close schools. Do you think it's a good idea?
The fact that they're opening earlier is definitely helpful and will hopefully mitigate against the learning losses that we fear with school closures. As you had highlighted earlier, learners are, young children in particular, are said to not be particularly susceptible to the COVID-19 coronavirus. But obviously we're dealing with a new mutation. So that's also, we obviously want learners to be safe. We're hoping with the rollout of vaccinations for teachers that we're working towards a place where learners and teachers can be in the classroom full time following the school holidays. As you know, schools will be reopening for all primary school learners from the 26th of July, which we are glad about, because as you mentioned, schools are also sites where school meals are provided, where psychosocial support is provided, and it's important to continue with teaching and learning after the immense shake-up, if you have a better word, you know.
Yeah. And I mean, here's the thing, is that we know how much learning has been lost. But Cynthia Barnes from NATU just made such an excellent point, saying the reality is that there are schools still without water, and that for an overcrowded school, where sometimes you've got as many as 60 or 70 kids in a class, even a rotational system just means your class is at a sort of average normal fullness, which is still too full for COVID. How are you as Equal Education keeping an eye on those problematic areas?
We have constantly called for the Minister and the provincial the MECs of Education to publicly relay how they're doing in terms of providing school infrastructure. We've been facing the same problem for a number of years, but more explicitly, more acutely in the period of COVID. And from last year, we have consistently called for MECs to update the public, to update parents, to update learners, to update society on how they're doing in terms of providing school infrastructure, including access to sanitation, access to water, which are vital to ensure that learners and teachers are safe in school, how they're providing mobile classrooms and so on. Due to ensure that there's social distancing that happens in classrooms. There's been some resistance, you know, from the DBE, but we're hoping that will happen soon, where we are alerted about how infrastructure is being provided. In the DBE directions, we've asked that the heads of departments and provinces support schools to ensure that they've got the infrastructure they need to allow learners safely back in schools. And this is obviously tied to our campaign on the norms and standards for school infrastructure, which we've been running since 2010, advocating for minimum infrastructure to be in school. And now we are at this point, all this time later, where we're still struggling in the middle of a pandemic.
Yeah, and it always, things like norms and standards, infrastructure, maintenance, seem like boring issues, unimportant issues until there is a crisis. You make such a good point. Thank you so much for your time. Hopolang Selebalo, co-head of research at the NGO Equal Education.